Okay, so we are going to be spending most of this evening talking about cassette tapes as a way to talk about other things. But we're actually going to start out with a cut from my favorite vinyl record of all time.
Our assembly guest today is Mr. Paul Yearout, who has devoted the past 24 years working with teenagers. Today, Mr. Yearout will speak on the subject, the now generation versus the stereo generation. Mr. Yearout.
Well, thank you very much. It's certainly a great pleasure to be in your school today, and I do appreciate all of you taking time to come to this assembly. Of course, I don't suppose you had too much choice, but that's the breaks.
So yeah, it's this traveling preacher, this guy Tex Yearout, in some school gymnasium back at some point in the 1960s, and he's there basically to talk to these kids about how to be better teenagers. Which, of course, you know, means talking about alcohol, drinking and driving, and, of course.
Brings me to another subject I'd like to talk about, a little three-letter word that you spell, sex. You know, there's a big communication gap between your generation and mine, but it's nowhere as evident as in this area because we seldom ever talk about the subject, or we do it in some ridiculous manner, where a guy gets up in front of a bunch of people like you and says, now this afternoon, children, I want to talk to you about sex. And you all sit back laughing up your sleeves because you know more than the guy speaking.
I mean, for an evangelical preacher, the guy's pretty funny, right? And, you know, well, he gives some very cringy, dated advice that I'm not going to play for you. He also does really seem to be trying to build these kids up, to help them to believe in themselves.
My young friends, you are the future, the only future there is. And with your wonderful minds and great opportunities, I plead with you to prepare yourselves to lead America and our world to a bright future, free of the tyranny, the hate, and the killing that's going on all over this world today. God help us. And I know you can do it, if you will. I want to commend you on being a fantastic audience. I know it's not comfortable in those bleachers. I can't believe your fine deportment, your wonderful response. It surely says something to me about you, and this is why I have great hope in your generation. Thank you, and may God bless you.
And I mean, as weird as it might sound, listening to this guy for the first time, I kind of fell in love with him.
I'm always intrigued by parents who stand around and tell their teenagers, now see...
Certainly fell in love with the way he transported me to a different time and talked about problems that weren't really mine as a 25-year-old at the time, but were still somehow relatable. It's actually hard for me to put into words what drew me in so hard. But anyway, hooked by this record, I spent years, literally years, flipping through used vinyl records at Goodwills and record stores looking for anything like this Tex Yearout record. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing. Until one day when I walked, probably an aisle over into the cassette section. And what did I find? Well, How to Raise Happy, Confident Kids, Rewards and Punishments. Chakra Hookup, Psychic Experimentation with Hypnotist Dick Sutphin. And then a personal favorite of mine, which I'm willing to lend out to anyone in the audience who asks first, Light Her Fire, How to Ignite Passion and Excitement in the Woman You Love. I mean, in this cassette section, there was tape after tape, recording after recording of lectures and instructions from hypnotists and gurus, advice not just for teenagers in gymnasiums, but for folks of all ages with every problem imaginable. This is a big deal for me. And it sparked a very, very small question. You know, why on this, but not on this? Now, fortunately for you all, because this would be a rather boring evening if not, the answer to that question is pretty interesting. And it says a whole hell of a lot about what's going on right here and right now. As we're about to see, the story of these self-help tapes is really the story of how we collectively started unraveling. I say that line and I get one of two responses. One is this, all of you laughing, to which I say, wait how you feel at the end. And the other one is people who I actually don't know what they're doing. So I appreciate the laughter, thank you. And so, tonight we've got a show in 3 acts for you. We are going to go from a mall to the dark side of the moon, rewinding into the not so distant past, looking for how the hell we all came to feel so alone. But first, as one does with the story, let's start at the beginning with this guy.
I'm Shad Helmstetter, and I'm glad to be with you.
Okay, well, you mind if I just jump in with some questions for you?
Please do.
Okay. Shad here grew up in Minnesota. Today he lives in Florida. And I called him up to discuss a life-changing shopping trip he took back in 1981.
I was in a store in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Kmart offers gift certificates to make your shopping more enjoyable.
Very possibly a Kmart. And as he's walking up and down the aisles, checking out what's new.
And I saw Sony's first blue and silver Walkman.
It was the Sony TPS L2. And Shad had never seen anything like this. In fact, he'd never worn headphones in public before. But it was sitting out for folks to try, and so a little sheepishly, he picked the thing up.
I put the earphones in.
Pressed play.
And it was absolutely breathtaking and inspiring. It was, I thought it was magic.
And Shad, he was not alone.
Tuning out and tuning in. About 750,000 people nationwide are doing just that.
I can turn it up loud enough so I can drown out the sounds.
It just puts you in your own world all by yourself.
I mean, where the Walkman went, these transcendent, these surreal experiences seemed to follow.
I remember vividly that walking or roller skating or dancing, there was this kind of disconnect from my normal everyday experience.
That is Juliet Christensen. She is a historian of design at the University of London, and she has dug deep into the history of the Walkman. And she says, well, it was so disorienting for her, at least, because whereas before her entire life sort of felt almost like a documentary, with her eyes acting as the camera's lens, capturing the world around her, once she put those headphones on and pressed play, the camera almost seemed to float out of her eyes, turn around and point back at her, with this invisible director suddenly calling action.
Suddenly I'm in this film, right? And I'm the star. The protagonist.
I'm singing in the rain.
Gene Kelly tap dancing through the streets.
In the rain.
Or perhaps, an action hero running from the bad guys, or a teenager in love for the first time, all over again. But anyhow, back in that Kmart.
I recognized then that Sony would sell millions of them and others. And
Shad, still standing in the electronics section, still in a bit of a daze, started imagining the implications of this device.
No, that's correct. But I wasn't thinking about it in terms of music, which is how everyone else was probably thinking about it at that time. I was thinking about it in terms of the tool to rewire the brain. I mean, what if we could change how we think by listening to cassette tapes?
Now, as out there as this idea might sound, it did have some grounding. Shad, he believed strongly in the power of repetition. Back in the 60s, stationed with the military, he was told to learn Spanish and do it fast.
And when you're in the military and you're told to do something, you tend to do it. And so
Imitate the Spanish words as closely as you can. ¿Quién es él?
Es mi padre.
So he got himself back then a reel-to-reel tape player, some Spanish language tapes, and started listening to them over and over.
¿Quién es él?
Es mi padre.
And over and over.
¿Quién es él?
And over.
Es mi padre.
And over again.
I became reasonably fluent in a fairly short period of time, and that notion stuck. And I thought, well, if you can learn a whole new language by listening to it repeatedly.
You know, why couldn't you learn other ways of thinking doing that exact same thing?
To be more confident, for instance. And when I held that Sony Walkman in my hand, I remember thinking, now anyone can do it.
Okay, so he got himself a microphone and a recorder, and what I need everyone to do now is take these headphones that you've got. The big thing here is to notice the volume control. I don't want anyone blasting their ears out or saying, I can't hear it! So, volume control right here. Take a look for it. All you're going to do is put your headphones on, and we are going to take a listen to what Shad Helmstetter made. So everybody got their headphones on, put them on, finger on the volume, and hit it back a house, please. Anyone feeling more confident? Maybe a little cringy? I kind of like it, but even if you hate it, you have to admit that Shad, he was onto something.
I worked for the company back in the records days, and it was going nowhere. It kind of had to shut down parts of the business to keep it surviving.
That is Vic Conant. For years, he had been trying to sell messages like Shad's on vinyl records with no success. But suddenly, with the arrival of the Walkman and now this exact same material on cassette tape,
the business took off. All of a sudden, we were selling millions of these cassettes every month.
Like a record exec, Vic went out and signed folks like Shad and published their material. And at the beginning of the boom, he says most of their products were like Shad's, very affirming, very motivational.
You can be and have all that you want in life.
Playing this tape over and over again, you will develop your unlimited potential.
As time went on, customers began demanding more and more specific products, like how to improve their memory.
I'd like to personally welcome everyone to the Mega Memory Program.
Or how to be better at business.
Welcome to How to Deliver Unpopular Messages, an instructional tape from American Management Association.
And eventually, things got very, very weird. Again, if you would take these headphones, put them right on. You're definitely going to want headphones for this. And again, if you would, hit it. I mean, I think it's fair to ask what the hell is going on there. Like, it's sort of these two dueling fairy tales. One in the left, one in the right, where if you try to listen to one, you sort of lose the other.
Okay, I'm going to tell you the trick, how the trick is done right now. I'm going to expose the contents of this idea, which, by the way, the first time it happened, it was an accident.
Ladies and gentlemen, psychoanalyst, hypnotist, and the mind behind these, quote, hypnoperipheral processing tapes, Lloyd Glauberman. And as he told me, these tapes, they're almost like those trick images where you sort of have to take your eyes out of focus to see what's there. If you want to hear the hypnotic message he's communicating, what you have to do is listen to what is being said between the two stories. So, for example, if the story in the right ear says...
the word feel.
In the left ear, what followed was...
the word better. So the listener at that moment in time, the only thing that's actually available for that split 2 seconds is feel better.
Now, what Lloyd made there, it literally could not have existed without a Walkman and headphones to deliver it. And I mean, Shad's creation from a little bit prior, like, it definitely would not have been successful. I mean, we listened to it on headphones. Can you imagine, like, sitting in your living room on speakers, your wife's next door, your partner or whoever, and you're hearing about how I like myself? And so to me, at least, as I was diving into this, it was starting to seem that, this whole self-help movement that I had become sort of interested in, it all came down to this little blue box. However,
I could pick that apart as a critical theorist of media by saying, well...
Please do. Pick it apart, yeah.
Okay.
Again, that's Juliet Christensen, and she says, that is not the whole story here.
There's something else as well, which is that the kind of period of success of self-help, right, the 1980s, when it really kind of came to prominence, was a particular social and political climate.
She says, everything else that was going on in the world at that time, that was important too, and that the world's most influential man at that time was a guy that I presume this audience is not a huge fan of. A guy by the name of Ronald Reagan. And well, yes, he is remembered for making big government the decade's boogeyman. He also cast the American individual as our nation's hero.
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land, we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before.
He even wrapped his message in some pretty self-helpy language.
There are no constraints on the human mind, no walls around the human spirit, no barriers to our progress except those we ourselves erect.
I mean, you
Take
seem to
care
be
of
saying...
yourself. Be the best version that you can be. It's all about you and you and you.
Nothing is impossible. Man is capable of improving his circumstances beyond what we're told is fact.
And when this political message collided with this personal technology, and potentially that singing bell, that is when self-help exploded. Like a chemical reaction, both parts had to be there, and once they were, the resulting blaze was almost impossible to contain. Which, to me at least, makes these tapes so much more than just some woo-woo fad. I mean, seen in this light, to me, they were an early manifestation, a warning perhaps, of where we were headed. So why was this such a big deal?
Why was the Walkman such a big deal?
Yeah.
Because you could choose your own music. I mean, it's simple as that. You could choose the sounds that you wanted to listen to.
Which meant that you could also listen to the sounds you wanted to listen to, and you could choose the sounds that you wanted to listen to.
Which can be kind of joyful, but radically alters your relationship with society.
Now, to see what she means there, we're all going to take out our headphones one last time. You're going to put them on once more, and all I'm going to do is play a brief video clip for you. And what I want you to do, all I want you to do is sort of watch it and notice how your body is responding to the media. So headphones on, final little thing here. Go for it. Okay. Did anybody have anybody watching, listening, did anybody have a strong feeling about what was going to happen next? Like the video cuts off, obviously, they're right around the 60-second mark. Anybody have did you have a sense of what might happen next? Anybody? I can ask another question if that one. Sorry, say that again?
It felt like something terrible was going to happen.
Okay, tell me more. What, like what?
A disaster, a plane crash, a bomb going on.
Okay. Anybody? Okay. Let's do raising hands here, folks. Thank you very much. Anybody else have a different sort of experience of listening to it? Like, yeah, right here.
The same thing that happened just before.
Which was?
Sounds.
Like, okay, where did it take you to? If we're talking about media transporting us to different places, where were you transported to?
Well, I live in the 80s in a mall, so.
Okay. Anybody else would like just get the tenor of the whole thing? Sure, right there.
Well, so you threw me by saying what happens next, because I was experiencing it in the moment
Yeah.
as alienated from everybody else. You're not hearing them, you're not part of them, you're observing them from afar.
Okay. Anybody else? Sort of the emotional tenor. We've got isolation, terror.
Mine wasn't the emotional tenor, but I was expecting to rewatch the clip with the actual sounds that were happening and thinking how jarring and different the experience would be versus this sort of bubbly, smooth noise.
You know those people in an audience who go, less of a question, more of a comment, right there, but you've totally sort of revealed what the heck it is that we're doing here. Yes, exactly, you were spot on. So there were 3 different audio tracks being played. Each of you was given a different audio track. So you saw it coming right there. Right. Right, I'll give you all a moment with it. Yeah, you need it. I'll give it to you. Scene. Okay. So yes, each of you was given one of 3 different audio tracks. One was, yes, just the sounds of a mall. One was this sort of like Bourne ultimatum, like it sounds like the mall is about to blow up. One of them is this sort of like bubbly, lovely little optimistic thing. And here's the thing. This experience that we all just had, sitting in a room together, collectively seeing but individually experiencing, like that was not possible before this thing. It's totally common and numbing today, and we don't even think about it when we walk down the street. And yet, 40 years ago, not possible. And this, to me, it seems, is really the world that these tapes portended. It was a world with a new meaning of the word together. A world where not only our sounds could be personal, but our truths and our realities as well. Alex Overington, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so let's widen the aperture a little bit, shall we? Because, well, yes, the 1980s was certainly a moment when this fragmentation went into overdrive. It didn't start or end there. And so I'm very excited to invite to the stage the professor of media sciences at Boston University, just right across the street there, Professor Catherine Caduto. Ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for being here. So first of all, we just have to do like the local, like,
Sure,
I'm not
sure.
from here. How far did you have to walk to get here?
2 blocks.
Okay,
so
pretty
not
good.
very far.
And this seems to be literally a town full of professors and college
It
students.
is. It certainly is.
And so are the summers just terribly boring here? Like,
They're very quiet.
Okay. We
I don't
don't
know
want.
if I would call it boring.
Okay, maybe relax.
Relaxing.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so let's just start with who the hell are you and why the hell have I invited you to be on the stage?
Why am I here?
Yeah.
So, like you said, I am a professor of media science at Boston University, and I study the internet in all kinds of forms. My current specialty area is online dating. Yes, there's always that kind of like, oh, really? But I've also studied different aspects of social media, and including Spotify, right? So how people listen to music. And I'm really interested in how people have different experiences online. And I think it ties in really nicely to this idea of, are we isolated? Are we connecting? Whose facts are real or not? So that's how I ended up here.
Excellent. Well, for the record, I contacted Catherine because her bio seemed to fit the right person to talk to at this thing. And then we talked for the first time, and it actually turns out that this is like a better fitting glove than I could ever imagine. So what did you do for your dissertation, which seems to really lock into place here?
So back when music streaming was first really taking off, I was very fascinated by it.
And what year was that? Maybe we've already forgotten.
2012.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So
Obama.
Back in the day.
Okay.
So I'm big music fan, have always tried to collect CDs, records, everything. And so when streaming was taking off, I was fascinated by it. And I did my thesis work on how people were starting to adapt to streaming services, if they were, and what the sense of personalization was. And so I was really interested in how people went from either buying records or making their own CDs and, writing on them, labeling them, to then creating playlists that were very personal, but maybe not as visible. But on the flip side, one of the most interesting things about Spotify is that incorporation of your friends list from Facebook. So what you're doing on Spotify is actually very visible. So while you're having this kind of fragmented experience, it is also something that people could still see and engage with. And so that is what I did my thesis research on, trying to understand where, how people were listening to music and, whether it made them feel like more of a fan if they actually bought something versus if they were starting to adopt streaming services, if maybe that was just exciting.
Okay, well, I am only 33 years old, and yet I feel like an old man in most conversations I'm in. And so in this setting, it's that, like, I'm sorry, if you don't buy the record, you're not really a fan.
Well, and that's what a lot of people felt, right? Because
Right.
when you have buying the record, it takes effort. There's almost an emotional experience to it. Even if you buy it online, you still have to find it. And then the fact that you get it and you can hold it. That was one of the things, and again, this is 10 years ago, but people were like, well, I need to be able to hold it because that's the tangible representation of my
the materiality.
fandom. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
Because, right, your computer, you might own your computer, but you don't own Spotify. Right, all you're ever doing is paying to access it if you pay for the premium. So you never actually own that music. And I think we're seeing that with, different streaming services. 1 month something's on HBO and then the next it's on Netflix and you have no idea where it's going to be next.
But maybe I'm asking you to tell me I'm wrong, because I hope that I'm wrong, that in a digital space where materiality is less and less important, there is still A, an ability to be a fan, and B, an ability to connect with other people through that shared interest. So if you were talking to your grandfather, how would you argue this against him?
Against him, great question. And part of why I'm excited to talk about this, because I think it's easy to come down really hard and negative on the internet and on this lack of materiality, but I think there is still a lot of ways to connect with people, and particularly to connect both with fans, if we're talking about music, fans who have that in common, but also the artists themselves, right? So there's a way to actually reach out to your favorite artists, comment on their things, engage with them. So there's much more opportunity for two-way interaction instead of just the buying and then kind of going off on your own.
But does that feel the same to you?
This is the debate, isn't
You
it?
want tell me, yeah, how do you feel?
And I think it depends on who you are a fan of or what it is you're trying to get out of the interaction. And that's what a lot of my research looks on, is the orientations and motivations people have when they interact with any media, right? Because if you really want to express fandom, to a lot of people, it's got to be the material aspect. So even if you follow someone on every social media platform, you still have to buy the shirt. You still have to have some representation of what that fandom means and is. And I think that's part of why the online dating space has become so interesting, because a lot of people will get on dating apps, message back and forth, and never meet in person. And so then it still doesn't really feel like a real connection. And so I'm very intrigued in this kind of disconnect between, well, can we have these really fruitful engagements online? Absolutely. But at some point, we probably have to have some offline interaction. But that doesn't mean we have to for everything, right? There's a lot of back and forth here. Like if you look at online communities, those, so many across different platforms, flourish really well. A lot of those people never meet each other in person.
Sure. Okay, well, let's jump to online dating, because I'm married, and fundamentally my marriage is the product of online dating.
Okay.
And yet, I'm still very skeptical of it. Which is, 70-year-old man in a 33-year-old body. But one of the things we didn't touch on, but is very central to the Walkman and my understanding of it, is this level of intimacy.
Yes.
There's a one-on-one connection between the creator and the listener through the headphone, through the moving through space. And oddly, the online dating seems to be sort of the logical conclusion of a relationship between technology and intimacy, because now two people are feeling intimate, mediated by a technology, which I'm skeptical of, as I said. So how'd you get interested in this, and where do you fall on this question of intimacy and what a mediating technology does to
Yeah, we could talk about this the rest of the night,
Okay.
first of all. But I do think you're right. I think there is this full circleness of, you go from the Walkman where you're choosing, you're interacting with a certain creator. Now you're finding other people to connect with through technology. And so I actually got interested in this, like right when I was finishing my thesis work on Spotify. It's also when Tinder was really starting to take off. And I was fascinated by watching. I have one friend in particular who would just swipe. And I was like, but what's the point? Like, you're not really looking at...
She's looking for the best one.
Yeah.
That's what she's doing.
But I was like, you need to, don't you want to look at the profile? And one of the wildest experiences was, so another friend was swiping, and he was like, I'm going to go meet this girl. And I was like, oh, okay, have fun. We were all out with a group of friends, but he was like, I'm just going to go see if I even want to meet her. And I followed him because I was like, this is fascinating. And he had met her.
Wait, so you're following him following someone?
Yes,
okay,
yes. But
okay,
I had
great.
Because so he had met her online, had talked to her online, and as soon as he saw her in person, he was like, I know this isn't going to be a match. And I thought that was really interesting, because I think a lot of people do that, where they have this idea that builds when they look at profiles. Or even when you're messaging, because you can only say so much in a message. So you start to develop this idea of who a person is. Mm-hmm. And then when you meet them, it's sometimes really hard for them to live up to that expectation, because within the technology, you're very limited by what it is you're able to do. And so I think kind of the other natural form of, jumping from the Walkman to this is not just the personal experience of listening or engaging with another person, but it's also crafting a form of yourself. Right? And I think the one quote about the movie starts, instead of being a documentary, now I'm in a film. I think that is what we're seeing with making an online dating profile, but also with, an Instagram profile or anything where you're trying to figure out what pieces of yourself to put on display, because at the end of the day, internally you're still you, but you have to pick what's going to be seen and judged by others.
The act of curation.
Mm-hmm.
Once it was, what songs am I going to curate and put on this cassette to give to you, someone I'm interested in. Now it's your entire self curated. Again, is that exciting to people, or is that sort of disgusting? Well, okay, we got the gentleman right here. Yeah. So maybe my last question for you here is sort of, what's lost in your mind as we forge forward in this brave new world that I would love to think started with the Walkman? It probably started before that. But what's lost in terms of our ability to connect and our ability to experience communally? And where do you see that going in the next 15, 20 years?
It's a big question, but I think there are a lot of interesting things happening. And again, I think there's a lot of things intersecting. So obviously I look mostly at online dating because I think it's a great way to understand that one-to-one connection. And a lot of the disconnect that I see in my work is that sense of, well, how do I actually meet someone in person? You know, I have this goal, but it ends up being about the technology and not with the result of the technology. And I think we see that with other platforms as well. You know, I look at how news gets kind of modified, right? Facts don't really matter. Your facts don't matter because mine do. And it's all about finding that, well, who's going to reinforce that, or who's going to reinforce my beliefs? And so I think there's something really interesting about not just the curation of the self, but the curation of everything around the self, right? Finding your echo chambers, or even limiting the music that you listen to, right? Because once Spotify knows what you like, it's just giving you the same thing over and over again. And so there's almost a reduction in what we're able to explore. And again, I don't mean to say, I don't mean to be like a big bummer, because I don't think that's totally true, but I think it comes down to us to kind of fight the algorithms that are at play in all of these things, because, right, algorithms are trying to learn what we're all doing, what we're all interested in. Everything wants to keep you connected, and that's the other big difference, right? The Walkman, you could drop it, right? You could move on, whereas our technology is like, but what if I give you something else to engage with? And so I think it's on us to really be mindful of that and think about, like, all right, if it's hour 2 on TikTok, I gotta step away from this, right? So I think we have to remember that we are ultimately still in charge of the technology. Otherwise, the fragmentation continues.
Ladies and gentlemen, Catherine Caduto. Thank you so much. Nice job. Okay, to close this thing out, I've got one more story for you, and it is about what I believe is the craziest collective experience we humans have ever had, and the one guy who was left out.
Thank you. Except you don't have the effect of, is the juice really worth the squeeze?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a story that was originally told to me by the guy you heard right there, Zach Taylor. He is a documentary maker, also a fan of cassette tapes.
I shot and directed a documentary called Cassette, a documentary mixtape.
How many cassette tapes do you think you have?
Oh my gosh. I probably have a couple thousand.
I've only got a couple hundred. Anyhow. Story starts summer of 1969 as the crew of Apollo 11 are about to blast off to the moon. And along with all their space gear and all their training, these guys are carrying a thing with them that no one had ever held before.
The name of this thing was the TC-50. It looked like a sleek, elegant, minimalist aluminum brick.
And what it was really was a prototype of the Sony Walkman. It's a little bit bigger than the Walkman that they would release to the public 10 years later, a little bit heavier. Functionally, the only difference is this little red button on the top, the record function. And this red button, it's actually why these things were allowed on board.
Because the gloves that these guys used, even today, I'm sure like an astronaut's glove is not conducive to like jotting down your thoughts. And the more I think about it, the more mission critical this thing is.
Mission critical?
Yeah, yes, mission critical, because they're going like Star Trek, where no man has gone before.
Got to record it like no man had done before. And so, July 16th, 1969,
We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
These three astronauts had about a 3 days journey to get to the moon, or to get to the moon's orbit.
And as they are flinging through space, the folks at NASA, of course, they're listening to everything going on up there. And they could actually hear these guys using their Walkmans, just not as recorders.
This is Apollo control at 59 hours, 9 minutes. Apollo 11 now 182,000 nautical miles from Earth, and the velocity down to 3,072 feet per second. The intermittent music that we're getting is apparently coming from the spacecraft. The crew has on board portable tape recorders with music on the tapes.
Yes, each astronaut had a personalized mixtape with music on it that they brought up there with them.
And apparently the music is triggering the box-operated microphones, and we're getting intermittent music down from the spacecraft.
Now, NASA co-signed on all this. The thought was, we got to send them up there with tapes to record onto. Might as well fill them with music first. So
Mickey Kapp, the record executive, would go ask each astronaut, hey, what's your favorite song? Okay, thank you, hold my beer. I'll come back with a mixtape for you.
And as Zach there tells it, the music these astronauts brought up there with them, well, it offers a little peek into each of their personalities. So, for example, the straight-laced mission commander.
Neil Armstrong's cassette has this kooky album from the 40s on it.
That's an old favorite of mine. It's an album made about 20 years ago called Music Out of the Moon.
He's a little hard to hear there, but Neil Armstrong went to the moon with an album called Music Out of the Moon. Take a listen.
Neil Armstrong, like, that was his jam.
And I mean, he played this stuff on board so much that there were times where NASA would have to call up to him and say, hey, Neil.
Oh, well, we appreciate you turning that off.
Can you turn that off, please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
The story goes that Buzz, the big talking space cowboy, requested a very particular song on his tape so that the moment that they touched down on the lunar surface, he'd be able to reach behind him, pull out his tape player,
his TC-50, his proto Walkman, and press play to
Fly me to the moon.
And then let me do.
Among the stars.
Are you serious? That's the legend. That's the legend. That's how the story goes.
Buzz did tell this story on multiple occasions, but years later, after he sobered up, he said, maybe that didn't happen.
But listen, if a whole building of rocket scientists can believe enough to send these three young men out into space, then I am going to exercise this little, faith the size of a mustard seed and believe that Buzz Aldrin reached behind his seat to play Fly Me to the Moon, because what an amazing moment.
Now, this moment and these playlists generally are the sort of strange, forgotten, possibly partially invented bits of history that cassette heads like me can't get enough of. And I think that's sort of all they would be, were it not for the third astronaut on the mission, this guy Michael Collins. Now, it turns out Collins' playlist has totally been lost to time. I reached out to NASA, the National Archives, the Smithsonian. No one has any idea much of what was on this tape, let alone where it is today, which, oddly, I think is sort of fitting.
Michael Collins is the one guy nobody knows. The third wheel. He's just the guy who, like, you know, in history, like, they couldn't have done it without him. Like, they really needed him. What did they need him for? But Michael Collins was the linchpin in all this stuff. Michael Collins was the one who made sure that they, first of all, got to the moon, and more importantly, made sure that they got home.
So, to pick the story back up. July 20th, 4 days into the mission, around 2 p.m. here in Boston, it was time to actually go down onto the moon. And so Buzz and Neil, they crawled over into the far end of the spacecraft, the lunar landing module that they called the Eagle. They sealed the airlock and they detached. Meaning that the whole time that they were down there on the moon, Collins, he would be up there all by himself, just waiting.
Michael Collins had 21 and a half hours, almost a full day, where it's just him alone orbiting the moon from about 60 miles above.
And not only is he alone, but half the time he's up there, he is in total darkness. Every 48 minutes, he would pass behind the dark side of the moon, meaning no light and no contact.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. All your systems are looking good going around the corner. We'll see you on the other side. Over. This is Apollo Control. We've had lots of signal now. We'll reacquire the spacecraft again on the 13th revolution in about 45 minutes.
Collins did this 23 times. 23 times for 45 minutes at a time. All he had was his heartbeat, his thoughts, and the darkness. And while he's sitting up there, he knows that the hardest part is actually yet to come. Because before they can go home, Buzz and Neil, obviously, you know, they need to get off of the moon. They need to blast off at just the right time so that they'll be in the moon's orbit at just the right spot so that Collins can grab them. And as if that wasn't enough,
there was no way to test the engines on the Eagle taking off from the moon. There was no way to test it. It was completely untested. It was an unknown.
Yeah, we didn't understand the moon's surface well enough to know how it would go.
So what happens if, you know, the engine doesn't have quite enough gas to get them back to the orbiter? Or what if they overshoot it? And privately, the three astronauts, gave themselves about a 50-50 chance of getting off the moon. So Michael Collins is orbiting all by himself, wondering if he's going to return to Earth alone or as part of a 3-person crew successfully having visited the moon.
This is Apollo Control. Collins has gone behind the moon on the 23rd lunar revolution. While he waits for his comrades to rejoin him for the trip back to Earth.
I mean, just picture this for a moment with me. On one side of the moon, facing Earth, you've got Armstrong, who has just delivered from the surface his broadcast back, you know, his famous line.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And then on the other side of the moon, in total darkness, totally alone, you've got Mike Collins.
So in this moment that literally the entire Earth is experiencing something together, he remains alone, disconnected, and out of touch from all of it.
Exactly. So, oh my gosh, this is what I keep going back to. This is where having a Walkman, having this hunk of aluminum with the record button, this is where this suddenly becomes, as I said, mission critical.
Because while Collins is up there, the most solitary man in the history of the universe, to calm his nerves or to get the voices out of his head, he turned to a cassette tape. He pulled out his Walkman and hit that red button.
And said, my secret terror for the last 6 months has been leaving them on the moon and returning to Earth alone. Now I am within minutes of finding out the truth of the matter. Dude, if you're alone, if you're on the dark side of the moon, and all you have is a Walkman, how is that cassette not your very best friend? The closest thing you have to another human being, a listening ear, a shoulder to cry on. I think that cassette is a life raft.
that's our show for you, ladies and gentlemen. A couple quick notes, if you would, please. First of all, Endless Thread, thank you so much. That was so lovely to have an opener in this world of storytelling. To Stephen Davey and the whole team here for making this all possible. The guys back at house, guys and gals back at house, learned this script in like 2 hours. It was amazing. To Soren Wheeler for all of his editorial guidance. To KQAD for helping us sort of put this all together in the first place. And to Alex Overington for all of his music throughout this entire thing. Thank you all so much for coming out. Thanks for supporting public radio.
Give them a big round of applause again. That was awesome.